ever heard artists say, just use references, and thought, okay, but how? Have you ever felt lost in the endless debates about tracing, copying, and referencing? You're not alone. I struggled too, even quitting art multiple times. But now, after recently reigniting my passion, I finally get it. So let me break it down for you, and hopefully save you a bit of that frustration. Please note that these are just my views shaped from my experiences and not dictionary definitions or ironclad rules. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. I will be covering 3 main topics in this video: tracing, copying, referencing. Tracing and copying might sound similar, but there's actually a big difference between the two. Let's start with tracing. This is the act of drawing on top of an artwork and is something that almost all artists have done at one point or another. I know what you're thinking, this is pretty self-explanatory, but I promise it's important. Why, you might ask? Well, that's because it's not always as clear-cut as you might think. I've prepared a little demo which will hopefully help me prove my point. Let's take a look. Here you can see my little dude, and I'm just tracing each line as accurately as I can. Okay, now to make it a bit different, I'll use different colors and maybe change bits here and there. And voila! We have a trace drawing. Take note that even though some aspects have changed, it's really easy to discern that tracing has taken place. The lines still match up pretty clearly. In my opinion, tracing isn't the best way to improve your skills, so it's best used sparingly. However, it is not something to be ashamed of or persecuted for. Tracing can be a helpful tool for practicing shapes and line work, but shouldn't become a crutch in the long run. Please remember to always credit the original artist, photographer, or otherwise creator of the media which you have traced, if you are planning to share it online. But wait, you might say, what if, for example, I trace pieces from different media or only trace the hands from a character? In cases like this, your finished art piece will probably look different from the originals, so is it still necessary to credit the original media? The short answer is yes. It doesn't matter how many, how big, or how small the pieces you traced are. Be honest with yourself and your audience. You might be surprised, people can be more likely to connect or engage with you if they feel a sense of camaraderie. Every artist struggles. No one starts out perfect. So embrace the learning process, and you might find that people will be more inclined to give you advice and root for you. So, tracing is pretty straightforward. But what if you're drawing something freehand while still trying to match the original closely? That's where copying comes in. Copying refers to replicating an art piece, photo, etc. as closely as you can without tracing. You can think of this as being akin to still life, landscape artwork, or simply putting onto canvas what you see. Let me show you an example. The example we will be taking a look at is from this book, How to Draw Fantasy Art, illustrated and written by Steve Beaumont. Let's jump in. The style, pose, and essence of this piece that I had found in the book really resonated with me, and I wanted to try copying it so that I could learn from it. The picture marked number 1 is from the book, and the picture marked number 2 is my art piece. As you can see, my finished piece looks very similar, so similar in fact that it almost looks traced. This method is much more likely to improve your skills than tracing, as you're forced to closely observe the shapes, colors, shading techniques, and much more. Even really advanced artists do this from time to time, because it helps them to understand various techniques more accurately. This in turn will make it easier for them to incorporate things they have learned into their own artwork and improve their skills. However, I want to emphasize that copying should be seen as a learning tool, not a way to claim someone else's work as your own. Once again, if you plan to share a study like this online, please remember to credit the original artist, photographer, or otherwise creator of the media which you have copied. This shows integrity and fosters a good relationship with other creators. Remember, the internet always finds out sooner or later, so save yourself from the negative stigma that could arise from deceit. So, we've talked about tracing and copying, but what about referencing? This is where things finally clicked for me. Referencing is about using sources like artwork, photographs, and real life to inform your art piece. Unlike copying, where the goal is to replicate what you see as closely as possible, referencing is about taking bits and pieces of information and transforming them to fit your unique artistic vision. Reconstruct them in your own style, using your imagination and experience. It might be difficult to understand without some visuals, so I invite you back to have a look at the Clip Studio file where this little dude came to life. Alright, here we are! Check it! Twins! For this little monster, my main idea was to combine an eyeball with Tim Canpy and a bat. Once I had that concept in mind, I gathered a few references to help refine the design. Starting with the wings, I really liked how this reference had an inward slope, drawing attention to the center. I thought this would be a great way to naturally guide the viewer's eye towards the creature's body. Then, I found another reference that had these smooth, curved lines throughout the entire wing structure. This helped shape the final look. Next, I wanted to add some details to make the wings feel more organic. I took inspiration from these two references, which featured rounded joints and claws at the tips. These little touches helped make the wings feel more structured and believable. Now, moving on to the body, I wanted to create something that felt solid and balanced, while still maintaining that eerie, supernatural vibe. Starting with the mouth, I wanted something bold and dramatic. This reference caught my eye, no pun intended, because of its thick, sharp teeth. It had that classic vampire vibe. I loved the look, so I adapted it, adding my own spin to match the creature's design. Speaking of eyes, the main feature of this design was always going to be a giant, singular eye. I wanted it to feel almost hypnotic, like a black hole pulling you in. I found this reference with a glowing effect that really stood out to me, so I used it as inspiration to make the eye look as striking as possible. Now, for the feet. I wanted something that matched the overall chunky and stylized aesthetic of the design. At first, I looked at bird talons for inspiration, but they felt too thin and sharp for the look I was going for. Instead, I found a drawing that had a stockier, more grounded feel, which fit the aesthetic much better. I liked the overall shape and proportions, but I made a few adjustments to suit my style. Rather than 4 claws, I simplified it to 3 for a more stylized look. I also reduced the wrinkles in the skin to keep the design cleaner and more cohesive with the rest of the creature. Finally, the color scheme. I wanted something dark and eerie. I came across this strange creature with deep purples and murky greens, and it was exactly what I was going for. Building on that, I tweaked the shades a bit, but you can see how the reference influenced my final color choices. And there you have it! This is how I approach referencing, not copying, but taking inspiration from different sources and combining them into something unique. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end of the video. If this helped you out, I'd love to see your artwork. Tag me on Twitter if you use references for a new art piece. I might even feature it in my next video or livestream. Don't forget to drop a comment down below sharing your thoughts or struggles with using references. I'm excited to see what you all create across the nooks and crannies of the internet. See you on the flip side!